So I actually got distracted from my list. I was supposed to be working on Sinners this week and kind of like the more cultural impact that is being realized to this day. But I got distracted with this movie called The Great Flood, and I wanted to talk about that because it caught my attention with two of its main commentaries, one of which I think was actually intentional, and the other, I'm not sure if they meant what they might be suggesting, but yeah. Anyway, roll the intro. Welcome back to the Key Takeaways channel. I'm M. If you're new around here, welcome in, take a seat, and grab some tea. I actually have iced coffee in this unseasonably warm holiday season. If you're not new around here, shout out to y'all for subscribing and supporting this channel. And don't forget to like the video. So like I said, I got distracted. So today we're actually going to talk about the Great Flood. And my makeup for today, I didn't really know what theme to do outside of it was supposed to be more neutral, natural, but it kind of went a little dark to, I guess, match Sir Gojo on the shirt. But yeah, I guess it's still appropriate for a disaster flick. So actually, me and my husband, found this movie on Netflix called The Great Flood this past weekend. It's a Korean sci-fi movie that on the surface appeared to be about a mother and her son trying to survive an apocalyptic flood raging through South Korea. However, as the movie went on, it revealed that the floods resulted from an asteroid hitting Antarctica. Funnily enough, not climate, but an asteroid, and melting the Antarctic ice sheet. So these floods were not just local to South Korea, but in fact global. But we soon realized our main character, Gu Anna, is actually a senior researcher who was working on and refining something called the emotion engine, which seems really critical to protect and ensure both it and Anna's survival, at least based on what Anna and the audience are told at this point. So Anna carries her son Shin Jae-in in tow as they climb to higher ground in their high-rise apartment, and they encounter Sun Hee-jo, someone who supposedly works for the same company as Anna, but I guess in the security sector. Hee-jo explains that Anna's former colleague who worked with her on the emotion engine is missing and presumed dead, making Anna the only scientist capable of continuing this project. However, as Anna, Jayan, and Hee-jo finally make it to the roof to be picked up by the helicopter to carry them to safety, Hee-jo explains that only Anna's survival is essential for this humanity project involving her emotion engine, and so Jayan must be left behind. Well, the body of Jayan must be left behind, but his memories for this emotion engine can come with, so they gotta go in the kid's head. Anna escapes in the helicopter, and beyond Earth on spaceship, she finally learns that additional asteroid impacts are imminent, is basically happening as she's watching, and is going to cause Earth to become uninhabitable. Synthetic humans capable of reproduction are to be created and seeded to Earth post-impact, with Jayan again being one of the synthetic humans who have been created to test the emotion engine. And the flood scenario is actually going to be used as a simulation to refine the humanity project and the emotion engine by testing the lengths a mother would go to successfully rescue her child. The flood itself was real, but they're going to use that scenario all over again as this testing ground. And this is more so a side note for me, but for the movie's purpose of establishing how the bond between a mother and her child is so strong, we do see the payoff at the end, but throughout, like, Jayan personally kind of worked my nerves because he just wouldn't listen, and that was causing me extra anxiety for this to be a disaster film, especially because it was a major flood that had tsunamis follow. So it was very anxiety inducing. And later when we learned that Jayan is actually a synthetic AI baby, it actually was a little more confusing because you would think on the surface initially that being AI, you would listen, but I digress. I also will caveat that my frustrations and anxiety with the fact that I'm actually not a mom. So maybe moms out there felt differently. But yeah, Kid was working my nerves. But again, I digress. But we are then launching into the sort of simulation game, not haha game, but it is technically Anna gaming her way through the simulation of the same flood, where Anna now has to find Jayan again, Lord. And she goes through the simulation over 21,000 times. I would just had to end me and unplug my consciousness. And apparently that's relatively low for machine learning slash AI testing of something as complex as emotional engineering, at least according to Reddit when I was looking it up. I think the exact number we see by the apex of the movie is 21,499. So Anna went through this simulation 21,499 times. But as simulation Anna's memories unpack, she begins to make different decisions, like helping other people she had previously ignored and looking for specifically closets where she previously told Jayan to hide when she first chose to abandon him in the actual flood. So the film ends with Anna and Jayan destabilizing the simulation, and they both opt to jump in the water from the roof as a tsunami approaches. And this shows them presumably succeeding in the emotion engine experiment. All right, let's get to the commentary. So the movie itself was fine and interesting watch for an hour and 45 minutes, but two overarching things sort of at least stuck in my mind from this, which I said in the beginning. One I think was actually intentional for the movie based on the topic at hand, and I think one might have been unintentional, but like kind of goes hand in hand with South Korea's social movements right now. So the first thing that sort of stayed with me that I believe was intentional was this question of an AI engine or software's ability to actually craft something called an emotion engine that, when you look a little deeper into it, was really just the AI using the synthetic human's memories, or a real person's memories in Anna's case, and perhaps an algorithm of predictable responses to sort of replicate the emotional depth of humanity. And I did think it was interesting that this emotion engine was pivotal for humanity's survival, despite the fact that the humans we see post-simulation are of the synthetic variety. If you were to kind of look at the CGI, I'm assuming it was CGI, it might be AI, but CGI effects towards the end. Nonetheless, for the sake of this plot, the emotion engine was basically the black box that would ensure some semblance of humanity to carry on into the future. And so while I did wish personally this movie explored more of the ethical side of creating such an engine for the sake of humanity's survival, it was interesting to see the sort of mechanics and testing of this being talked out in real time. Additionally, there was the question of whether 6 years of childhood and 1 day of a natural disaster, plus Anna's previous life experiences leading up to the day of the flood, would even sufficiently capture a human's emotional range and replicate it in this synthetic human-like AI bot. Because just from what the movie gave us, it does seem that this synthetic human experiment was pretty self-limiting in accurately capturing the full human experience. Again, you had about 6 years based on Anna and her chief scientist's children. We didn't see any synthetic teenagers or anything. So you had about 6 years of manufactured childhood, and one, possibly more, because there were more scientists who were in the chip leaving Earth, but one scientist's memories and life experience up to the day of the actual flood, plus her bond with one of the synthetic children, which is Jayan. So I guess if the purpose of creating these synthetic humans was to ensure some semblance of humanity, even if it's humanity light, carried on and reproduced, then I guess perhaps this experiment, for all intents and purposes, fulfilled its job. So another theme or commentary present in the movie that I thought was quite interesting was the use and appearance of an AI child, and this being conceptualized in the face of South Korea's declining birth rate, as well as South Korean women's 4B movement. Now, if you don't know what the 4B movement, aka the Four No's, is, it's an ideology that first emerged in South Korea around 2015. We're always the last to know stuff. I didn't know about this until around 2023, 2020, late 2022, early 2023. Apparently this had been going on, or it had kind of come up around 2015, following the rise of Megalia, a radical feminist online community. So within this space, women began advocating for no dating, no sex, no marriage, and no childbirth as a means of rejecting patriarchal control. Makes sense. And according to this article from the Atlantic Fellows from the London School of Economics and Political Science, the 4B movement has recently evolved into the 6B movement, incorporating two additional principles: not consuming misogynistic products, so more of an economic boycott side of it, and not engaging with men who do not deserve a response. Queen shit. Sometimes this also includes actively supporting women-owned businesses and uplifting female creators and entrepreneurs. The movement has also gained popularity among Gen Z girls on TikTok in a trend called Boy Sober, which promotes female independence by abstaining from romantic and sexual relationships with men. But at its core, the 4B movement is about autonomy for women. It's also being blamed in part for South Korea's declining birth rate, which was 0.74 at the end of 2024. So this has led South Korea, the South Korean government, to offer monetary incentives for everything from first dates to engagement and honeymoon expenses. It's not funny, I'm sorry. To childbirth subsidies. Now, I said all that to say, obviously this movie is science fiction and we're in the age of experimental and generative AI, but it's not lost on me that the concept of a synthetic AI baby was introduced in a movie based in a country where said country is facing a declining birth rate and companionship and reproduction strike. I'm not outright saying that the South Korean government is considering developing AI babies, but the timing of this concept being brought forth in a sci-fi movie with what's currently going on culturally in South Korea is all very interesting, timely, and interesting. Speaking of childbirth and AI babies, going back to the emotion engine, apparently only needing the first 5 to 6 years of a child's life for it to succeed in its testing and calibration, this made me further wonder if one of the more subtle or unintentional commentary from this movie was the possible idea that some adults tend to favor the first 5 to 6 years of their child's life over their later years. Since the first 5 to 6 years are not only some of the most formative in child development, but also the most time parents spend with kids compared to when they're older and begin commitments like school and extracurricular activities. So, like I said, overall, the movie was cool. Not a bad way to spend an hour and 45 minutes on a lazy Sunday. I do think it did a great job of capturing Anna's frustration and panic and trying to survive the very first time with her AI synthetic son, Jayan. And it kept this lingering frustration throughout simulation Anna's montage of failed 21,000 plus simulations. I would personally, again, have like sort of a more in-depth look at the ethics of all the emotion engineering and synthetic human making. I know the movie touched on it a bit with the AI babies, especially when it came to the question of giving them up, or in Anna's case, abandoning poor Jayan on the roof. But it would have been interesting to explore more into the ethics side of this whole experiment and testing. Also, I just like exploring the philosophy of ethics for random things. Anyway, the movie is fine. If you have Netflix and 2 hours to spare over your winter break and like anything K-drama related or sci-fi, go watch it. So let me know if you might be interested in watching The Great Flood or if you've watched it and had some of the same thoughts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching, and be sure to like this video if you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can see more videos like this one. Also, follow me on my socials, Empowered Muse on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, and my Substack, Ibs Musings, as well, where I write about a lot of the same things I tend to cover on this channel. If there's anything you want me to cover, be sure to put it in the comments as well. I will get y'all centers in a few days, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.